Hi, this is Jose Palomino with another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And today's guest is Erik Olson of thisarray.com. And Erik is an owner of a dynamically changing business in a dynamically changing industry. So we're going to talk to Erik about the various pivots he's made to drive towards what his goal is to be a national presence at $100 million, his journey to $100 million. We're going to talk about that right now. Let's welcome Erik. Well, welcome, Erik, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Hey, Jose. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, Erik, I'm actually very interested in talking to you because your business and your leadership of your business has you've made some bold decisions, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But to give our listeners some context, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you work with and what you do for them, and then we'll dig in from there.
Sure. Now, I would love to go into detail about some of the pivots that we've made, and there have been quite a few. At present, we are a digital marketing agency. We focus on law firms. We've been doing digital marketing exclusively for 3 to 4 years now. And before that, we did various different kinds of digital services, including software development and digital marketing.
Well, and so now you've grown, you started the business, you've grown it, you've taken it through a few pivots. So let's dig into that a little bit because the people listening to our podcast are primarily business owners. So the word pivot, changing, making big decisions like that, none of that's easy. And it's always challenging, especially once you have a going concern, you have infrastructure, you have people, personnel, you have a client base that may not be in that pivot. So could you just expand a little bit, Erik, in your journey? First of all, what made you realize, boy, we should pivot? And then how you did, some of the steps you took to manage the transition that a pivot represents.
Sure. Yeah. So there's been maybe 2 or 3 significant pivots since I've been in business. I've been in business for 12 years now, and I was a software developer. So I was the guy that was coding websites and mobile apps, and I did that for over 15 years. And I started my business as a software development company because that's what I did. It made a lot of sense. And I started to hire software developers, but I realized that I was missing something in the company. And one of the things that I was missing is that I surrounded myself with people that were just like me, other coders. And we could make websites, we could make mobile apps that worked great, and they could interact with APIs and databases and like really technical stuff, but they didn't really look that great. And I knew that we were missing that design element in the business. And so I started to outsource some of the design to other companies. And then eventually I bumped into my current business partner and co-founder of Array Digital, Kevin Daisy, and he ran a design shop. Okay. And what he did was he designed websites and he designed other things.
So it's like a peanut butter and chocolate moment, right?
That's exactly what it was. And so right away, he had a client that had contacted him, but needed more technical services than he could offer. And I had a client in the exact opposite situation, a client where we were building a very complex web application, but he needed like a marketing website, and we didn't do that kind of work. And so we each had business for the other. And as we started to work together and our team started to work together, we had more conversations about what would it look like if we actually merged forces, because I was sending a lot of work elsewhere to places like him or other shops, and he was sending that kind of technical work elsewhere to people like me or somewhere else. And we thought we'd really rather keep it in-house, and maybe the two parts coming together would create a bigger whole. And so that's exactly what we did. It took about a year between when we met each other and when we actually formalized the merging of the companies. But that was a very, very significant moment for both of us. And we also rebranded because we had created these company names, our previous company names, years and years ago. And things had changed, and we realized that there were maybe some downsides with that company name that we had each chosen. And so we brainstormed with the team, and we came up with a brand new name, brand new brand. And from then on out, we were Array Digital. That was about 4.5 years ago.
Okay, so let's I want to break that down just a little bit from this point of view. So what I'm hearing is you had a set of capabilities, strengths that you recognize. And is this your partner also probably recognized they had a certain set of strengths and capabilities, and you said, okay, this is definitely, as I said, peanut butter and chocolate Reese's moment, right? Where you bring it together. But now you also have your team was your team. It had a certain way of thinking. Maybe there's a little culture set in. He had his team, a little way of thinking, and their culture set in. How did you manage that? Because I know a lot of people listening to this have done exactly what you've done. They see somebody has a certain kind of machine capability if they're in a precision machining or something, and they say, well, they have some, they do induction hardening or something, and they would be a great complement to our business. But it's a different mindset when you're approaching different problems. So how do you bring that together? How have you navigated the joining of families, as it were?
Yeah, great question. And it wasn't easy. So we signed the merger documentation on a Monday at our lawyer's office. And on a Tuesday, we rented a U-Haul, went to my office, loaded it up, moved it to a brand new office, then went to his office, loaded up the U-Haul, and moved all the stuff into our new office. So right away, we got the teams together. We knew we had to do that. But that was just the beginning of chaos. So, he had ways that he did things. I had ways I did things, different billing system, different people, different issues, different opportunities. And it took about 6 months to really just kind of figure out what we had just done. And during that whole transition time, the people that used to work for me still refer to themselves as the old company name or Eric's. I work for Erik versus I work for Ray Digital. And then his folks were doing the same thing. And I recognized that there were still elements of the old companies around. In particular, our old websites were still up and running. And I thought that that was a significant source of confusion internally. The
Mm-hmm.
longer those external kind of like artifacts survived, the longer I thought that people would kind of associate themselves with those old identities. And so one of the things that I did during that 6 month transition is I said take down those old websites because I just didn't want them to exist. I wanted there to only be Array Digital, not the old websites, even though those old websites, people were still submitting the contact us form for work. And then they
Wow.
would come to us.
That's what makes it challenging, right? You're thinking, oh, okay, what's going to happen now?
It was very challenging. And I thought this would be simple. We would take the old domain names, we'd redirect it to the new domain name. So they'd come to our website and then they would just submit the contact us form on that site, on the brand new site. Well, Kevin used to get a ton of leads. So he would get a lot of small leads, whereas I would get fewer but bigger opportunities in the software world. So the majority of the leads that we were getting came from his website. And again, I thought I'm just going to switch the traffic, move the traffic over to this new website. No big deal. It was a big deal. So instantly our leads dried up. We just stopped getting leads. So even though people were going to the old website domain name and then getting rerouted, they must have been confused. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know who the new brand was. They had never
Yeah,
heard of it.
and we know that people on the internet are very patient and studious and will spend a lot of time on your website to make sure they understand what they're on. When in fact they probably said, "Oh, wrong, mistake. This isn't what I
Exactly.
expected."
Yeah. And so that in retrospect was a mistake. And there were warning signs. So like the web developer that used to work for Kevin, now works for us. He's like, I don't think you should do that. And I said, no, just do it.
Just
And so I gave the order and we paid the consequences. So we stopped getting leads right away. And we thought about bringing the old website back, but once we decided that that could be a good idea, too much time had passed. We knew we were going to have to like build up the SEO value in Google. And so we just had to do it the hard way. So on the one hand, it was a good call because the team did actually start to gel very, very quickly as a result of just kind of getting rid of the old brands and getting rid of the old artifacts. But it cost us in the form of leads that we could have gotten that we no longer did. So if I had to do it all over again, I would leave those websites up and just try to make it very clear to people going to that website that the old company has been acquired or merged or something, and try to bridge to the new company name.
yeah, but I also think, Eric, from the sounds of it, you were responding to a real in the office thing that was going on that you needed to fix, right? So sometimes in business, like in life, we have to make tough choices on the fly, and there's always we always like a mulligan. I mean, we'd all have a long list of things we'd like to do over if we
Yeah,
could. But wow, so all right, so you transitioned from there, and so people started thinking more one team, is what you're telling me.
correct.
Started working together. So then, how long before you started seeing some real like multipliers. Like, okay, it's great we're not like at odds or we're not in different directions, but we didn't do this to just have 1+1 = 2. We did it
Mhm.
so 1+1 equals 3 or something like that. When did that start happening, and what did you have to do to make that leverage really take place?
Another fantastic question because we had this issue specifically. So when we merged at the time, I was doing $900,000 in revenue per year. He was doing $300,000 per revenue per year, combined 1.2 million. And so we said in the very beginning, before we even merged, if we don't do 1.2 million this next year, or more, actually, if we don't do more, then what was the point?
Mm-hmm.
Because we did that individually. So at the conclusion of the first year, we did about $1 million. We barely got over that $1 million. And we did not make more. We did not hit the same revenue. We actually made less. So it did cost us definitely when it came to revenue. That 6 months of turmoil, for me in particular, because I was, you mentioned like making the call at the time to take down the websites. I had people here, and I was living it day in and day out, and I could see the confusion, and I was confused. And so that's probably why I made that call. I just had to stop the hemorrhaging and try to get on the path. But all those decisions, all those changes, they all affected us, and they hit us on the bottom, well, the top line actually, and the bottom line. But yeah, that first year we made less after the merger than before the merger. The second year, things started to pick up. And at that point, when we merged, he was a design shop, I was software. The idea was to make beautiful and well functioning web applications and mobile apps. But we had another problem. The other problem was that these were projects that we were working on. So a client would hire us, we'd work on their project until it was done, and then we'd hand them the project, and then that was it. There was no more work to be done for that client. And one of the things that we noticed is that a lot of our clients were struggling with marketing. So we would give them this product and then nothing would happen because they wouldn't market it. And so we started to give them advice, and we would say, you have to market this product. And then we'd give them a little more advice. We would say things like, however much you spend with us, make sure you spend on marketing.
Hmm.
And then we started to actually provide those services, and we hired a digital marketer. And we wanted to continue to service these clients with some sort of service, even if it wasn't our core. And we hired a digital marketer, and his whole job was to continue to provide marketing on the products that we built. Well, about 2 years after the merger, our software leads dried up and our projects were coming to an end. And I did a deep dive into the finances of the company, and I realized that if nothing else changed in the next 12 months, we would lose about $700,000 in our software development business. And basically across the board, we were going to be losing money, except for this one small area of the business, which was digital marketing. So with digital marketing, we had recurring revenue. It wasn't a lot of money, but percentage wise, the profit was really good. And so I thought, you know what? We need to slim down on our more lucrative software development business, which is my background. And we need to focus on marketing, because if we don't, then we could be out of business in the next year or two. Or
Wow.
we'd have to get very, very lucky and go prospect and find a lot of people that need this service, sign them up, deliver the work, and get paid for all that in order to break even. So it was pretty terrifying. And the thing that we concluded was that the riskiest thing that we could do at that moment was to take no action and just hope for the best. We had to take action, and that meant focusing in on the digital marketing to try to build up that recurring revenue.
Well, I love, first of all, there's a great word you used there, Eric, which is terrifying, because every owner of a business, for the most part, somewhere in their journey, there's that inflection point where, like, oh boy, something's it could be a recession, it could be the loss of a major client. Every owner faces that moment. And you said it, you netted it out to a simple thought. Doing nothing or just hoping for the best is not a strategy. We have to take some actions. So tell us a little bit about how, so now you brought this team together for about 2 years, right? So you finally got like it's a bit more like the Brady Bunch, everybody's, we've blended the families and we're getting along, right? We have one name we're under, right? One rubric. And then you're discovering that a big anchor of the whole merger is getting weaker now, and you can just get back on that wheel, try to replenish that, but then you're still on the wheel, and then you notice this new thing that you did was actually, that's actually pretty good tomatoes coming out of that patch. It's not a lot, but it's still coming out. How was that transition then as a team to say we're going to do more of that? And tell us how that brings us to today.
Yeah, so we were quite transparent with the team. We would tell them what was happening, and we had a lot of software developers at the time, and they're pretty expensive to keep on the roster. And so we told them what was happening and our plan. So, one of our core values is transparency. And so I like transparency throughout the organization. And so, again, we told them what was happening. We told them our plan. We had about a 18-month plan to transition from software development to digital marketing. And frankly, it was a long shot, but it was the only shot that we had. And Kevin, my business partner, and I, we had many, many conversations about, are we going to have to cut our salary? Who are we going to have to cut and when? And what are we going to do if this doesn't work? It was, terrifying was the right word. So we put this plan together, we communicated it, and we started to implement it, and we started to measure the things that were important to us. The number of digital marketing clients, the number of services that we offered in digital marketing, which was growing, and I was just deep diving into it, learning as much as I could. And then also the amount of recurring revenue. So even though we still had a lot of project revenue at the time, the only thing that I cared about as far as reporting went was monthly recurring revenue. So we created a KPI dashboard, key performance indicators.
Sure.
And when it came to revenue, all I cared about was recurring revenue. And the other project revenue for me was just a bonus. So we implemented a lot of change at that point. We started to hire more digital marketers as our projects wrapped up. We had already communicated with the software guys that they were going to have to go elsewhere. We helped them transition. We talked to one or two key software developers, and we got an agreement for them to stick around and just help us transition out. And they wanted to actually open their own freelance agencies. And so I was like, absolutely, I will help you. I'll give you work. And so we had a really smooth transition out of that terrifying phase and into our digital marketing phase. And that concluded about 3 years ago when we went 100% digital marketing. And it has changed everything. And in particular, monthly recurring revenue, it has not only transformed the business, it has literally changed my life. And I say that because the terrifying business aspect of not knowing where the next dollar was going to come from, finishing projects, having to get new ones, always chasing the dollar, it affected me personally. It affected my marriage. It affected my family. I was scared. I was just scared all the time. And I was scared that we wouldn't live another day as far as the company went. And what would that mean for me? I'm unemployable at this point. I can't go get another job somewhere. So, and when once we got monthly recurring revenue going, I could actually start to relax a little bit in the present and start thinking about the future and really start putting some plans in place about what if this continues for the next 5 or 10 or 15 years? What does that mean? How big could we build this thing? And that's when we came up with the goal of growing to a $100 million national digital marketing powerhouse, which is our vision. There's no way I could have done that without first going through that terrifying phase and pivoting to monthly recurring revenue, pivoting to digital marketing, and just overhauling the company into something that's not even at the time, wasn't even my core offering, like for me personally, and that was terrifying too.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the things you let go of were the things that perhaps for 20 years as you built up your career, 20 or more years, were your foundational truths about who you were, what you knew how to do, the kind of problems you could solve, the kind of firms you could work with. There's a lot of security in the known. And you said, well, yeah, but I'm also seeing that the trend lines on that are not where I need it to be. And you started pondering the fact that, and it's still keeping me on that rat wheel, constantly churning new business. And this new thing, boldly you embraced it. So I'm thinking of that for owners listening to this right now, and they're thinking, well, no, we sell this machine and we've been doing it for 30 years. Okay, but Have you thought of maybe a subscription program for your parts business? Instead of waiting for the phone to ring, you say, hey, you use this many wear parts every year, so you can subscribe. There are ways to create recurring revenue even in businesses that don't feel like a subscription business. Although, and it may not be as big a shift as what you've done, where it's like now you're moving 100% to recurring revenue, but you could certainly create that platform for the reasons you talked about: peace of mind, knowing that January 1st, X revenue is coming in. That's a wonderful thing there. So,
Yeah.
Erik, if you were talking to an owner directly who was saying, boy, I know I have to make some changes, but I got these people, I got my bank, I got this, I got that, what word of advice would you give them about embracing change?
Well, of course, there's a saying, the only thing that's constant in life is change. It's true. And I think what you really need to do, though, is question everything. So everything about your business, you need to question all the time. And so many people get stuck in the mindset that, well, that's just the way things are. Or like you said, we've been doing this for 30 years. Or, well, everyone else in the industry does this, so we can't do anything different. And one of the things that we did is I just discarded all those notions. So as an example, we build websites for our clients. We still do the websites as part of our digital marketing offering, but I don't want to do it as a project. Almost every other agency in the world sells websites as a project. So you'll write a big check, for 5 or 50,000, whatever they charge and whatever you need, but it's going to be a big check. And then you have to pay for some services going forward, changes, hosting, stuff like that. And we had the exact same model, just like everybody else. But I wanted a recurring revenue, and I just kept thinking, how can I get it? How can I get it? How can I get it? And we started to offer support. And then we started to offer hosting, and we started to offer security patches. And we had a small support offering in addition to the projects. But I just kept working on it and working on it and working on it. And I wanted it. I wanted that recurring revenue so bad that I was willing to somehow and sometimes just walk away from the project revenue. And so we started to offer two different ways that clients could pay for it. One was as a project and one was as a service. So just as an example, I'll just use made up numbers. They could either pay $10,000 for a website and then $50 a month for hosting and keeping the lights on. Or they could pay, say, $1,000 or say $500 a month, and we would build it without charging them as a project. But we'd also provide all those recurring services, and we provide some more. We'd provide a couple of hours of free changes. And so, on the one hand, you have a $500 per month service, which will get it built, or you pay $10,000 and you pay a much, much smaller monthly fee. And to our surprise, people started to go for the $500 per month service.
Sure.
And we thought, well, this is interesting, but it's going to take us a long time to make up that $10,000. But if we can keep them a long time, we can keep them happy. Once we make up our project fee, then it's all profit from there. And the moment that everything changed is when I just walked away from the idea of how much we should charge for a website because everyone else is charging that. And I started to look at our costs, right? Because when it comes to a website, a website's a really good example. And I want the other business owners who provide a project or something like, that's project based, if you will, to think about it, as a project. You typically charge a lot more than you need to when it comes to cost for that product or that project, because you have one opportunity to make money with that client.
Right.
And so it has to be worth your while. But if you're doing this work all the time, you don't need to make quite as much because you're going to get paid every single month and for a lot of these projects potentially. And so I had to disconnect how much I thought I should charge because it was a project from how much I needed to charge based on things like how much labor costs me, how much, materials and whatnot cost me. And once I did that, I realized I could actually build the website and give it away, give the product and the project away, as long as I could lock in the services for a long amount of time. It's the shaving example.
Sure.
Give away the blade and give away the handle.
Right.
And charge for the blades.
Sure. And HP has made billions doing that with inkjets. As somebody who buys, you realize, dang, that's really expensive cartridges for my $99 printer. You're paying that again and again and again.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So
You spend $100 on a printer, but every time you need to get ink, it costs you $50, right?
yeah,
When you get the black and you get the color, or you do what it sounds like both of us do. You pay $5 or $10 a month, and then they just send it to you when you need it. It's great.
that's it. Much, much better. Wow. Well, Eric, this has been a great, great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us and being as transparent as you've been about your journey as a business owner. For somebody listening who says, this Eric sounds interesting, I'd like to find out more about what they do and reach out to you, where could they find more information about you or make contact with you?
Oh, sure. I appreciate that. Yeah. So there's really probably two ways. We have a podcast ourselves where we talk about a lot of these things in our journey. And I mentioned before, we're trying to go to a $100 million per year agency. So the name of the podcast is Journey to $100 million. And you can go to the URL journey to the TO and then 100, the numbers. So journey to 100million.com. And so that's our
Wonderful.
podcast. It's a daily podcast, about 5 minutes each time. My business partner and I, we do our individual episodes where we talk about things that are happening in the business, things that are changing, and lessons that we learned that can be applied to other businesses immediately. And then if you want to find out more about me in particular, you can go to a website. I am Erik J. Olson. So that's Erik, which is Erik, and then my middle initial J, and Olson is Olson. I am Erik J. Olson.
Wonderful. And Eric,
.com.
we'll have that included in the show notes. Once again, just thank you for stopping by and spending time with us today. Really appreciate it.
As do I. Thank you so much.